Good afternoon. Welcome to Digital ATN's Digital Learning Day. Thank you for joining us today throughout the day to refine and continue to develop digital learning skills, strategies, and resources that we can use to implement at your agency. My name is Jose Adorno. I'm the Digital Learning Coordinator at EdAdvance. I'm also joined by Amy Ferrari, ATN Coordinator. We will be your moderators for today. All our sessions will be recorded, and the materials shared by our presenters will be available after the conference via email. Please put in the chat any questions or comments during the presentation to get them to the presenters. Also, everything shared today will be available as topics for tech support. If you need help accessing the resource, looking for a tutorial, brainstorming ideas, or strategies and implementation, Digital ATN is the place to go, and best of all, it's free. I'm thrilled to share our fifth and last session, Empowering Adult Learners, Teaching Digital Citizenship with Impact. Our presenter works at EastCon and is our second technology specialist at Digital ATN. He has been working with us with cybersecurity. She is one of the co-presenters, along with myself, for the Knowledge Bites that we kicked off with Rachel Riggs earlier today, and starting our next session next week. And with that said, I present to you Brianna Pacharka. Thank you so much for presenting for us.
Thank you, and hello everyone. I hope everyone had a great day, and I can't wait to talk to you all about digital citizenship. So if somebody could just give me a thumbs up that you can see my presentations, awesome. Okay. So as Jose said, my name is Brianna Patriarca. I work for EastCon, and I'm also a technology specialist here for Digital ATDN. And prior to my current role, I worked as an adult education teacher and program facilitator. So today's goal and objectives, we're going to empower adult educators with the skills necessary to teach digital citizenship effectively to adult learners, fostering responsible, ethical, and informed digital behavior, with the objective of understanding the relevance of digital citizenship skills in the lives of adult learners, highlighting the importance of responsible online behavior, digital rights, and ethical decision-making, as well as identifying some learner-centered teaching strategies and routines to actively engage our adult learners in digital citizenship education. So we're going to go over just the basic introduction of what digital citizenship is. ISTE's 5 digital citizenship competencies that we want to look to incorporate into our curriculum, some simple integrations and strategies that can be used across all content areas to integrate digital citizenship, as well as some resources for lessons and other materials that can be used to supplement digital citizenship curriculum. So first off, what is digital citizenship? So digital citizenship is the ability to navigate digital environments safely and responsibly, and to actively and respectfully engage in those spaces. So not just being able to get onto a website or onto Snapchat or Facebook or TikTok, but to navigate it safely and responsibly and effectively. So I happened to stumble across this quote as I was searching, and it just put everything into perspective. Really, the internet is just a world passing around notes in a classroom. It is just information being shared in a different format, but I remember passing notes around the classroom and, check yes if you want to hang out or if you think this. And that really is all it is. And so we want to make sure that we help our students understand how to navigate that space. So one thing I would like to hear from you is, what are some concerns that you have with integrating digital citizenship, whether in your role as a teacher and integrating it into your regular content, or as a program administrator, making sure it's getting wrapped up into your program. And if you want to type a brief response in the chat so we can see what some of your concerns are. We'll give it a minute. So we have safety, yes. Language barrier, oop, another safety one. Who is communicating on the other end and asking? Digital etiquette and safety, identity theft. Yes, the safety is a big one. Um, Covering all bases, yes, for best practice. How to effectively use it in a multi-classroom. John, that is a great one. Differentiation between personal use and professional use. And students with low literacy or English skills. Yes, so these are all great concerns. And I think these are all concerns that all educators share. One of the things that I've heard as a program facilitator for about 4 or 5 years, as well as a teacher, really boils down to 4 concerns when it actually comes to integrating digital citizenship into curriculum and even at the program level. The first is the student goal. They are here to learn and accomplish, getting their GED or high school equivalent, or getting citizenship or improving their English, and they really don't see the point in anything else. They are very focused in on that one goal, and everything else is just taking them away from it. And sometimes I hear from teachers as well that I'm here to teach GED, CDP, citizenship, ESL, so on, and that is my priority. And if there's time, then I will wrap in those other things. And going in line with that, I don't have the time to teach this with everything else. And I know, as the person kind of pushing that on the teachers, as well as the person having to teach it, that you are asked as adult educators to teach a lot in a very short amount of time with a very diverse group of students, with a lot of times people coming and going and that kind of inconsistency with attendance. So you are tasked with the world essentially, and we ask a lot of you, and it's sometimes difficult to plug in another thing on top of everything else. And then also I've heard the concern about it being new concepts. You know, you're whether the educator or teacher is not necessarily comfortable with them and doesn't have the time to really learn them enough to be able to teach them. And so kind of thinking about these concerns, as well as all of the concerns with what we're teaching in terms of the competencies to make sure that our students are navigating safely, I want us to kind of think about a class environment, right? So with COVID, we went from pretty much primarily face-to-face classrooms to all of a sudden, we had to learn how to teach in this virtual environment within a very short amount of time. And so when we talk about a physical environment, right, we're talking about students in class that are physically in the classroom, the books, the technology, everything that you need is, for the most part, physically in the classroom with you and your students. And virtual, we're talking about instructor and students being in completely different physical environments, where they're interacting in a digital environment such as Zoom, or using a classroom platform such as Google, Canvas, Schoology, things like that. So once again in the chat, if you want to throw out either positive or negative difference in maybe some of the behaviors or interactions, or even the instruction that you've had to provide between these two class environments. So for example, you know, in a physical class environment, for me personally, I can hear multiple conversations at once a lot more easily. And so I can engage with multiple at once. I can understand multiple at once, but in virtual, it's very difficult to do that. I can really only focus in on one person at a time. So that would be an example. So if you want to throw things in the chat, any noticeable differences that you may have seen, and you can even apply this to meetings, just any kind of online interactions like that. And I know it's the end of the day, so if you were like, I am blanking, it's okay, because I have examples if worse comes to worse. Yes, harder to read the room in a virtual environment. That is 100%. Even with the presenting, I can't see anyone's windows or anything, so I have no idea what is going on. It is easier to see body language in physical spaces. Yep, definitely aligns with that. Yep, more in the moment assessment, a lot easier to catch things. And it's a lot easier to connect. Yes, a lot easier to build a rapport when you can physically see each other and interact. But on the flip side, virtual attendance is a lot easier, definitely, definitely. So some of the key kind of differences that I've noticed with physical versus virtual, right? Once again, physical, we're in the same space, we're all together, we're all experiencing kind of the same environment, and we can see what everyone is doing for the most part. And the goal of that environment is learning focused, right? Whether it's in a classroom or library, you're going all together with the same ultimate goal. In multiple, you're not only experiencing the physical environment that you personally are in as the student or instructor, but then you're trying to interact in the virtual space. And when you throw in Zoom, you may be also distracted by everyone else's spaces. I know for a fact with COVID, when we switched to, all virtual meetings, if I saw a pet, a kid, anything in the background of somebody's video, my attention was gone. My ADD kicked in and I was so distracted and so easily distracted. So that took me away from my ability to learn and pay attention. And you're essentially navigating 3 different environments. It might not also be learning conducive. One of the things I think we all learned with COVID is a lot of times our students struggled to actually find a space where they weren't being disrupted or distracted and where they could focus and pay attention to what was going on virtually. One of the other things, and I think this goes along with what John mentioned, in physical, it's a lot easier to participate and understand multiple conversations. Virtual, there can be multiple conversations, but it can be hard to gauge what's going on in that collaboration. And on the flip side of that, as Melissa mentioned, virtual can be a lot better for shy students. It allows them time to kind of think and feel more vocal. There's also actually a flip side to that. Because we aren't physically present with our other participants in a virtual environment, there's also a sense of distance and kind of removal from the situation that occurs. Excuse me. And it can actually potentially alter their behavior. So it can create this, what's called an online disposition effect, which is a prime example. And it's when individuals say things online that they wouldn't say in person. And this can definitely be a positive or a negative. So for those that are more shy, they may feel more confident and be able to speak and vocalize more. And on the flip side, it can also result in some negative things being said because they don't really feel like there's as much consequence virtually as there is in a physical environment. So this kind of goes with what Jose was saying as well. So in a physical environment, we're able to see everything. We can easily observe students. We can notice if students seem to be struggling, frustrated, if they really aren't doing the work, or maybe are getting sidetracked because they might be stuck. And we can provide those classroom management strategies and support to help them get on task. In a virtual environment, materials aren't always organized in the same way. The students aren't always visible. You can't see necessarily if they're working on something, kind of what John was saying earlier with the collaboration. They're distanced from the class, that kind of online disinhibition effect. They're maybe kind of distant, so maybe they are not interacting as much as they would have in person. And with physical, we can provide on-site support and troubleshooting. So if we are using technology in the classroom, we can see that they are unable to do something and provide immediate technology and support. But for a virtual environment, they need to have technology skills just to even get into that environment. And it is very difficult to troubleshoot that remotely. And anyone who suddenly had to teach with Zoom and help some lower level technology skills in getting into Zoom is nodding their head, I'm sure, right now, being like, yes, I remember. And it is a struggle when they don't have those skills yet, and we're trying to just get them into step one. See if there was any other ones I missed. Yes, a positive to virtual is that it can potentially be revisited and adjusted to a learner's speed. Thank you, Jose, for that. So you can just type a yes or no in the chat. So have you ever reviewed or had to speak to a student or even a staff member, if you're at the administration level, about online behavior and expectations? Just a simple yes or no. Yes, no. Okay. So a couple no's. So a few no's. Okay. So I know that, like, even in meetings, a lot of times I've had to either remind individuals of certain expectations with being in a virtual meeting, classroom, same thing, or trainings. If you've ever spoken to anyone basically about their online behavior or expectations, congratulations. You've taught some digital citizenship concepts and you probably didn't even know it. Just looking at these environments, when we're addressing some of these differences, so that switch from a physical to a virtual, in some of the meetings that we did, we kind of actually said, please shut off your camera if your kids come in or your animal, because of the fact that people would get distracted and then the meeting would go haywire. That's, online etiquette. Cyberbullying. So talking about, what you're saying online, how you're saying it. I know I've had to have conversations with people, including family members, about texts where it's all in caps locks and they're essentially yelling at me. Digital rights and responsibilities, digital communication. So what's appropriate for a chat, whether it should be a public or private, emails, posts. I think somebody mentioned that earlier, what the difference is between personal and professional in those regards. Digital safety and security, that was another one that popped up quite a bit. So ensuring that your account is not compromised. I'm sure some of us remember at the beginning of COVID, all the Zoom crashers that would just randomly crash the Zooms, making sure you're not sharing certain information so that people can access your accounts, things like that. And then digital literacy. So once again, those initial skills that they need to utilize to even get into a virtual environment, whether that's completely virtual and trying to get into a Zoom class, or even just in the class and trying to get onto a learning platform such as Aztec BE. I forget some of the other ones that are used for credit diploma classes and things like that. And if we look back at those concerns, the student is here to learn this one thing and they really don't have time for anything else. But to get them to that goal, we need to make sure that they're able to safely and effectively navigate that digital space so that it is not only conducive to their learning, but to their classmates' learning, right? For GED, they have to go online to register and sign up for their GED test. That is a step in their process to reach their goal. Teacher goal. To not address these behaviors and expectations could result in it negatively impacting students, whether it resulted in distractions, bullying, or disrupted the safe learning environment. It could be that they are giving away their password or letting a peer use their account for, let's say, Aztec to do some practice work, and that could impact your ability to see how they are doing and have an accurate read on what they need to work on. Work. I don't have the time to teach this with everything else. My ultimate goal today is for you to walk away and have some tools that are very, very simple, that are not super time consuming, and can very, very easily be integrated into your curriculum in a proactive way versus reactive. So actively teaching them these skills along with your content versus, oh, something happened and so now we need to address it. And this is something that you may have learned from experience and turned into best practice. Digital citizenship skills and concepts are mostly based in common sense skills that we use in our everyday physical environment. And we just need to connect and build these skills within our digital environments. So some things may require a little bit more of a lift to understand, such as cybersecurity concepts, but a lot of the other competencies are really just common sense, everyday skills. So with that in mind, nearly 1 out of 3 Americans currently struggles to perform their job effectively due to limited digital problem-solving skills, especially among people of color from both immigrant and non-immigrant backgrounds. So there is a need for this, and it is important that we're providing these skills and continuing to build on them with our students. So in looking at that, what competencies should we be focusing on? So once again, these are ISTE's 5 digital citizenship competencies that we're going to be looking at. The first competency is inclusive. So I'm open to hearing and respectfully recognizing multiple viewpoints, and I engage with others online with respect and empathy. Once again, this is something that we would expect in our physical classroom as well. So we just need to translate that to our online environment. And some of those concepts are cyberbullying, once again, what we say and how we say it, the caps lock. People don't often realize that that is essentially yelling. Purpose and intent, that digital etiquette, and intellectual property. So those are some of the concepts that can be translated from our physical to the virtual and cover that digital citizenship skills. The next one is informed. This one I think popped up quite a bit too when I asked earlier about some concerns with teaching digital citizenship, right? That we want our students to be able to evaluate the accuracy, perspective, and validity of digital media and social media posts. And so those concepts, can often focus around media literacy, propaganda, bias, misinformation, rhetoric, and of course, evaluating our sources. I know I don't have cable TV anymore. I watch everything via streaming sites, and most of my news comes from whatever shows up in Apple News and like the widget and social media. So it is very, very important that I evaluate the sources and I'm really analyzing what's online to make sure it's accurate and valid. Otherwise, I could be getting a lot of misinformation. And I know a lot of students are kind of in the same boat as well. So engaged. I use technology and digital channels for civic engagement to solve problems and be a force for good in both physical and virtual communities. So once again, making sure that people are aware of what they see and how they're receiving it. So having the digital literacy skills to navigate those platforms, being aware of their digital footprint. I actually taught a digital citizenship class, and we Googled ourselves. We looked at what platforms people could access publicly, what they could find. I also worked in employment and training prior to working in adult ed, and that was a huge thing that a lot of people didn't realize is people will Google you and try to see what information they can find that's available for free online. And that can have a huge impact on you and your possibilities for employment. Our roles in the community. So we have a role in our physical community, but also potentially in our virtual community. Civic engagement, a lot of civic movements and platforms are now online. And current events. So as I mentioned, I get all my news for the most part online, unless I happen to be in a waiting room where there's a TV and the news is on. So it's important that we are teaching our our students to be engaged and to use these platforms as a way to stay engaged and to stay knowledgeable about what's going on. And balanced. So you want to make sure that you're making informed decisions about how you prioritize that time and the activities you're participating online or off. So I know that when I got my new phone, it prompted me to do a weekly usage report when I was setting it up. And I was absolutely shocked at the number of hours that I was using for the first few weeks. In my defense, I do read ebooks, so I know a decent amount of that time was due to that. But even just seeing that total number, I recognize that it puts a strain on my eyes. It often left me feeling drained. It can affect my ability to fall asleep at night. I caught myself staying up later and later sometimes when I was watching TikToks and couldn't sleep. So I actually, recognized that I was a little off balance in that regard and had to set up a bedtime essentially for my phone. So I do not go on my phone past like 8:30 at night to make sure that I'm not getting drained by it. So some additional concepts, right, could be your digital identity. How do you view yourself online? Once again, that digital footprint. So, how much time and activity are you spending online? Is it too much? The impact on development. So this can have a lot of impacts in terms of even just our mental and physical health, our social emotional learning. So, the biggest one and probably the most obvious one, right, is how social media presents this lifestyle that seems perfect and wonderful, and they're always traveling and happy, and it can create this false image, and so that can impact us negatively, make us kind of feel worse about our life and things like that. And so being aware of that and making sure we're balancing it out and kind of taking away sometimes those negative things is very important. And having that balance will help us also be able to focus and prioritize on our other goals, such as getting our GED, improving our English, citizenship, things like that. And lastly, and probably my favorite, is alert. I'm aware of my online actions and know how to be safe and create safe spaces for others online. A lot of my job currently at EastCon focuses on cybersecurity and training on cybersecurity. So being aware of what threats are out there in our digital environment, the scams that are out there, how to recognize them, protecting your info, and then also our digital rights and responsibilities. So being alert of what information we're giving away and we have the right to say no to. And yes, Jose, social media is essentially life's version of Photoshop most of the time. I actually absolutely love watching the social media videos and clips of what you see on social media versus real life, especially with traveling. It makes you feel better about not being able to go to those places. So with integrating this, so what are some simple ways we can integrate it? So as I've said a couple times already, good citizenship in life, our physical environment can very easily translate into online. So good citizenship in person needs to flow over into a good citizenship online. It has a lot of the same principles: respect, being kind, and meeting those expectations. And our role is to teach our students how to transfer those skills to navigate and engage in that online world. So one thing I often hear too is that digital citizenship is treated as kind of this standalone lesson that is once again possibly cutting into other content that needs to be taught, which is why it's often a concern for educators. And digital citizenship does not need to be a standalone separate topic that you periodically cover when time allows. There are a lot of lessons, units, and activities online that you can pull from or use to really focus in on a digital citizenship topic and that take a little bit longer to do, like could be a few lessons or a full class period. And there are definitely certain content-specific topics where it would make sense to incorporate those larger lessons and activities, such as media literacy and online civic engagement. We do have a couple of Wakelets available that curate a lot of these resources, and we will be sharing those out with you when we send out the presentation. But what I really want to focus in on today are the simple, easy ways that you can integrate digital citizenship into your everyday content and instruction. So when you are thinking about integrating digital citizenship, I want you to think about 3 things that your students should walk away with. One is the relevance. So the relevance should be clear. How does this relate to their everyday lives? If you tell me that there is a tsunami in Sri Lanka, yes, I will be concerned for the people of Sri Lanka, but it doesn't really impact necessarily my everyday life. It's if you tell me that there is about to be a tsunami that is going to hit, then I'm going to be very concerned and I'm going to take active steps to prevent and ensure that I am safe. So we want to make sure that it is relevant and that it is clear to them how it impacts their everyday life. Going along with that, we want to look at the potential short or long-term impacts. So as I mentioned with the digital footprint, we Googled ourselves, we looked at past our social media, because once again, even if you don't come up, if somebody knows somebody who knows somebody, they could potentially see things on your social media. And I've even admitted in the class, I've done hiring before. One of the first things I did was went and Googled them, and that would impact my preference for a candidate. Similarly, being careless with your password and online safety could result in long-term financial consequences. If the effect or impact isn't clear, then they likely won't take it seriously. And also, we want to make sure that there is a connection to the content. So in the next few slides, we're going to go over some ways that digital citizenship competencies and concepts can easily be integrated into and connected to your content areas and instruction. So one of the ways I definitely recommend incorporating digital citizenship is modeling. So I constantly hear, how the younger generation is so tech savvy and, they know these things. And this assumption can often lead to missed opportunities for learning. So modeling can take less than a minute to demonstrate and can highlight a concept or skill that they really need to develop and maybe just aren't comfortable vocalizing, or that maybe you haven't noticed yet that they are lacking in. So as you're navigating the digital world to demonstrate or to even access sites when presenting in your classrooms, or even as an administrator in meetings and things like that, you can highlight questionable content, take a moment to discuss it. Instead of having the website ready to go on your screen, show them how you searched for it, have them practice it with you. And it's also helpful to point out that sometimes it's not always the first thing that pops up that is the correct thing. Sometimes you have to go down a little bit and really look through those descriptions on Google, and then show them any questionable or misleading ads and how you spotted them. There's always on every site sponsored materials. A lot of times those, it looks like it's the next button, but it's really an ad, and it's that the ad is in very small print, kind of showing them that, warning them, things like that. Very simple, very quick, and a nice, easy way to model what they should be looking out for. Share stories. It's easy to think that it won't happen to me, or it's not likely to happen if they haven't heard otherwise. Talk about what happened to you and how you handled it, mistakes you've made, how you learned from it, etc. So you can help reinforce those digital citizenship concepts. I was teaching a CDP class, and it just so happened that morning I woke up to find that my credit card had a number of fraudulent charges on it. And when I went into class that day, just as part of her kind of like getting settled, things like that, I shared that with them. I voiced how I was lucky that I had set up alerts on my credit card, so that way I was notified, and that I was able to intercede before they were processed and cost me hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And I also noted that I went in and I updated all my logins for any accounts that were associated with that card, just in case, so that hopefully they weren't able to access any other additional information or accounts of mine. And lastly, include citations in your presentations, including graphics. So I have a source page at the end of my presentation. If you'll notice, all of my little image graphics have a little citation underneath it as well. So that is, once again, demonstrating, intellectual property rights. So giving credit where credit is due, and make sure that not only are you modeling that, but you are setting that expectation for students as well when they are presenting and using material that may not be theirs. Another thing that we can very easily do is routines. Just regular reinforcing of certain concepts, such as computer use. Make sure you log off all accounts, delete any downloads or docs that contain personal data on public devices. At EastCon, when I worked in adult ed, we had a lot of public computers that students would use. And periodically I would go through and look at the downloads and documents files. And there was a lot of times documents that had social security numbers, date of birth. People would forget that it is a public computer that multiple students use. So reinforcing that with them. Review online etiquette and safety before each lesson, activity, or class. So, once again, be aware of those ad things, make sure that you are clicking on the correct links or going to the right sites, that if you are getting an email from something, like, for example, if you're getting invited to an account, show what it looks like, what that email might look like. So that way they know what to look for, and what might be fraudulent, right? We get a lot of Amazon fraud emails or things like that. You can kind of reinforce those routines as well, especially for citizenship, on what they should be looking for and things like that, in terms of, applying for their citizenship. Review password strength and safety every time students access and create online accounts. So whenever they're going in, remind them about what is considered kind of, a strong password. Periodically throughout the class semester or trimester, recommend that they change their password, things like that. Those are just very simple behaviors that really carry through and can keep you safe in other spots, and with other accounts. Current events. So I was teaching the Hunger Games, and we were looking at the lottery, and one of my students made a comment that there's no way that either of those situations would happen in real life. There's no way that our world could be set up like that. And that morphed into a discussion on the Holocaust and how we, let that happen, in quotes, their words, potentially, because of propaganda, bias, and misinformation, connecting that to more recent events, because once again, they're like, oh, well, that was like, 40, 50 years ago, like, things have changed. And then we talked about more recent events with illegal immigrant detention centers and some of the media and political campaigns about that. We talked about social media, how it can be positive in that it can bring attention to these things that we otherwise would have not known about because we would have relied on news sources to share it. It's a good way to bring maybe things that might not feel relevant to them, to make it relevant to their everyday life. It's also a good way to show technological advancements and how things have evolved. It could also be used just as an informal bell ringer or an end of the class discussion. You don't have to necessarily spend a lot of time on it, but just once again, kind of making those connections, and also kind of touching on why this is a valid source and how to evaluate it, maybe some of the misinformation that's out there around some current events, things like that. Going into that, articles. You can take core ideas from content and find articles that can be used to connect it to current events, to promote media literacy. So once again, evaluating media for accuracy and credibility, and to supplement content. You could also have students find or have to find and navigate articles versus giving them a direct link or printing it out. So making them go online to find it versus just providing it will reinforce those digital literacy skills that are also necessary to navigate our digital world. For example, if I'm doing an activity where we are evaluating living expenses and we're creating a budget, I could include an article about apartment scams, how to spot potential scams. I could have students search for apartments online. One student is more than likely to find it and try to use it just because, once again, apartment scams are usually too good to be true, so they're going to appeal to us. And then we can look at those in more detail. I could have students find articles on scams versus providing them with it. Very simple, may take a few minutes for them to do or add a few more minutes to your lesson, but it's once again reinforcing those digital citizenship competencies. Another one is we can ask our students. So when I was student teaching, my cooperating teacher did this, and I used it ever since. Whenever we had downtime in class, or I periodically do this throughout any class I was teaching, and I would have students write down a question and throw it in a bowl. Sometimes I would give them a topic, such as technology or life skills, or I would just leave it open-ended. And then we'd spend some time just going through some random questions. A lot of times I would get questions about filing taxes or job skills, including how to answer common questions or resume writing recommendations. I once got one on how to change a tire. And I would just show them how to find and determine the best resources for this online. I do know how to change a tire, but I haven't had to change one recently. And so I would have to go and find a video on YouTube to refresh my memory on how to change a tire. Also, for example, with resume writing, I love resume writing. I'm very picky when I look at resumes, and I always stress that when you're looking for support on resume writing, you want to look at the published date and the format recommendations, because the style of the resume may be dated. So it's important that we're looking at how old is this source that's telling us to format it this way, because if we're following an old recommendation, it could actually prevent you from being considered. People may choose the snazzier, newer version versus the one that is formatted in the old way. And my coworker and I recently did a podcast for Digital ATDN, and she surveyed a bunch of students as part of it, just to kind of get a sense of what students would want to know. And the ESL students especially had a lot of concerns about spotting scams and how they can protect and monitor their children's online safety and activity. So whereas she and I kind of were like, oh, I wonder if they're going to actually come up with anything, there were numerous questions. So if we ask, then we can actually tailor our instruction to try to address some of those questions as well. So periodically asking them, doing that kind of like fishbowl style, throw something in and I'll randomly answer it, as well as just checking in periodically on what they might want to know. And what I think is also a crucial integration is to discuss. So discuss these concepts and make sure that we are relating them and connecting them to the content. It's important. It's an important tool to actively, to get our students to actively participate in learning. And it also, once again, by discussing, can give them the opportunity to ask questions and to potentially further the discussion and further that skill development. And really, with any of the concepts and integrations that I recommended, we really should try to discuss at least a little bit, even if it's just a quick 1 minute, what does everyone think, just to make sure that it is making that connection for them. And so once again, we model, we integrate those routines. You can incorporate current events and articles, ask our students, and discuss with them. So that way we can connect it all and show that relevancy, the impact, and the connection to the content. So lastly, we have some resources available where you can find digital citizenship lessons, as well as some other materials that you can use to integrate into your content or learn more about these competencies. These are all located on the Digital ATDN website. I will make sure that the links are in the presentation when it gets sent out. The first one is that podcast I mentioned. So it's a very short podcast episode discussing the importance of teaching online safety and digital citizenship skills. Oh, Jose linked it for us. Awesome. The second, we have two, sorry, I'm in the wrong order. We have a professional development that I did last year on teaching digital citizenship and cybersecurity. So this professional development really focuses on some of the common cybersecurity risks and some strategies for how you can protect yourself online as well as your information, and how we can also teach digital citizenship concepts as well. And we have two Wakelets available on the Digital ATDN website. One focuses, has a curated list of digital citizenship resources, and the other is focusing on cybersecurity curriculum resources. And these include lessons, activities, simulations, these kind of pre-created lessons and activities and units that you can utilize to reinforce digital citizenship concepts. A lot of these are, some more lengthier things versus some of the strategies that I shared, which can be very short, kind of quick, and easily rolled in. These definitely are more by competency and topic, and definitely recommend going through. There are a lot of great simulations between the digital citizenship and cybersecurity Wakelets to really give students kind of that real life feel to it, that can help reinforce those concepts and can still be connected back to your content. As promised, my sources. And any questions? Is there an assessment? Yes. So there are actually, in the Wakelet for digital citizenship, there is actually an assessment tool that you can use as an educator to assess your digital citizenship skills. And then there's also one for students, and it actually gives you direct links to resources to improve those skills. Same with cybersecurity. I believe there's a few different assessments that were included in there that you can use to kind of assess your knowledge of those skills. And actually, since we are running a little early, I can actually show you those. So let me just go. So you would go to digital.atdnct.org. And those Wakelets are under our content area toolkits. And so we have the teaching digital citizenship and teaching cybersecurity one. So for teaching digital citizenship, I believe I linked it right up top, actually. Yep. So that assessment is this first one in the check out these three. And you can do it as a student, educator, or a caregiver. I believe the assessment is essentially all the same. I think it focuses a little bit differently on some of the skills and recommendations after to improve those skills. But you would just click get started, and then it asks you a series of questions, and you rate your knowledge or comfortability with them. And then it helps you to improve those skills so that you can rate higher in your confidence level with that topic. In terms of the cybersecurity, there are a number here. I think a lot of these also have some assessments built into them. You could also always use North Star as well. I believe North Star has a couple assessments on some basic cybersecurity, I believe. There's a bunch of different ones. There's even some more advanced ones if they wanted to really learn about cybersecurity as an actual profession. And there's some individual lessons and some simulations. So one thing you can do, we've actually used this internally at EastCon a couple of times, is Go Fish. So you can set up a kind of phishing email and see if individuals will click or download or whatever, and if they'll kind of fall for the phishing email. So this is a good way to assess as well. And there are just a lot. There's a lot of resources on cybersecurity. NetSmarts is also a good one, although it is aimed for K to 12. It is definitely a good one to utilize in any of the family lit programs where you want to make that connection as well in terms of the parenting. We do have North Star in here. And then there's cyber.org. I believe this one also has a assessment in there.